Alright, my friends, we're going to do some ruminations on green, draw, and commander. Alright, man, if you're new to the channel, you never heard this before, don't mind my voice, alright? I'm out sick today with the virus, dude. I got the T-virus from Resident Evil, brother. Not the one from the video games, the one from the movies with Mila Jovovich. I'm home in my leather jumpsuit, dude. I can't stop spinning around while I'm simultaneously shooting machine guns and flinging knives with pinpoint accuracy. My house is a mess. I got automatic handguns akimbo here, dude. So let's take a break. We'll talk about some underrated and overrated green draw options and chillax, like Pauly Shore, the weasel himself. But first, be like Mila Jovovich. Trick shot the subscribe button before you eat a laser grid to the dome, brother. That's engagement, dude, and that's real juice. Let's start off with an overrated card, the old Sylvan Library. Wanting a green for an enchantment, at the beginning of your draw step, you may draw 2 additional cards. If you do, choose 2 cards in your hand drawn this turn. For each of those cards, pay 4 life or put the card on top of your library. I see people running this without additional synergy and just acing themselves right out of the game, dude. It's like that meme with the big brain play. Your opponents can't kill you if you're already dead on turn 4. Now, Dominaria Remastered was the most recent reprint and it knocked it down to a cool $20. But I wouldn't run this except in a few select scenarios. You know, if I'm in a combo deck in a meta where we're trying to combo out turn 4, this digs deep in those decks for your redundant combo pieces. If I have enchantment synergy, sure, drawing a card off of this is really good in an enchantress deck. And if I have some life gain deck that's paying off gaining life, the extra 4 life to draw a card isn't terrible if you're putting up some serious life gain engine. Or how about I have some top deck manipulation theme for the commander? Then this is also pretty good, dude. I can put a creature on top or whatever I need in the top 3 cards. And lastly, if I have a commander that cares about drawing cards like Kydel, Chosen, or Crewfix, you never have to take the extra cards, but you do draw them. That's a combo deck that really utilizes this card. Now the art treatments for this thing are kind of cool. I like the mossy library versions. Better than what I assume is the stinkiest art, the floating monks they're just jamming out in the wilderness, dude. Imagine what that smells like. All that being said, I don't think this is a $20 to $30 card. I think that's driven by the utility and competitive metas and CEDH. For most decks, it's unnecessary, maybe overkill. I've seen people just die to nuisance attacks because this card encourages them to be greedy. Now let's talk about an underrated card, Return of the Wildspeaker. This only has 1 art and it looks like the Liver King after he stopped doing steroids, dude. I think that's the metaphor here. Garruk broke the curse of performance enhancing drugs, brother. He's got a hole in his belly, he's gonna fill that with some quality protein. 4 and a green for an instant, choose 1. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control, or non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. It's a little steep, dude, 5 mana, but very versatile. At that point in the game, this is usually drawing you better than a full grip of 7. You also have the instant speed ability to take out a struggling group of opponents by boosting your whole non-human team, dude. So don't run this in a human deck, you knucklehead. Overall, this is a great green draw option in any deck running high-power creatures. Contrast this card with Shamanic Revelation, dude. It's a guy smoking Mishma up in the woods, man. You gotta bring a buddy if you're going on a vision quest, alright? My mother always said that, brother. Be safe. This is sorcery speed and requires a bigger board. It's got a pretty huge ceiling, but requires more setup. But I think this card is a little overrated and more niche, but it's a relic from a time before green had as much access to draw. Now, in my humble opinion, a slightly better version is Rishkar's Expertise. 4 green for a sorcery, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. You may cast a spell with mana value 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. This has a slew of rulings, dude, but the most important is, you may cast one of the cards drawn by Rishkar's Expertise first effect while performing its second effect. So modestly, if you have a 5 power creature, right, you draw 5 and hopefully hit something a mana value 5 or less. This is 6 mana, but can be a huge swing that increases your board presence. And I'm usually not the biggest fan of Planeswalkers, but this guy's so buff, and if you think of him as more of a versatile Return of the Wildspeaker, it probably makes more sense. That second ability isn't bad. In the old days, he would come down, draw 6 cards, and die immediately, and that's okay. It's a decent option to note, just in case you like it. Then we have the suite of enchantments that draw cards on the ETB of a creature, and they all have their little idiosyncrasies. I think the best of the bunch is probably Garruk's Uprising. 2 and a green for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. Creatures you control have tramp stamps, dude. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Now that's from when Garruk was the president of the UAW, brother. He brought in some dinosaurs to enforce the strike and walk the picket line. This does a lot for a 3 mana uncommon. And trample can be game winning if you're making big tokens or popping cards in and out of the battlefield. It doesn't care how they enter, you know, and it doesn't care if they're tokens. Great card that's 24 cents for the Woodsman version here. Then we have the old Guardian Project, 3 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it doesn't have the same name as another creature you control or a creature card in your graveyard, draw a card. This is about 10 bucks. Has these Simic weirdos just inspecting some knockoff Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy, dude. This guy with the monocle staring straight into the guy's nip, man. The lady's writing down his observations like, oh, it's a good nip. He's like, hey, take it easy on my dude's nip, brother. This is a commander-centered card that just draws cards, brother. Especially if you're running a Blink commander like Emil the Blessed here. The Saucy Unicorn is pretty bonkers for 3 bucks, but we're not here to talk about beautiful unicorns in the night, brother. Then we have Elemental Bond. So this is cheaper but requires the creatures to be of power 3 or greater. In certain decks this is a little better than Garruk's Uprising, but is kind of powered out by the above mentioned cards. Doesn't have as much text, but it's easier to trigger. I run this in certain decks that are creature based but smaller creatures that aren't mono green. But if you are running mono green, a Tribute to the World Tree is probably better than that. Green, green, green for an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card if its power is 3 or greater. Otherwise, put 2+1/+1 counters on it, dude. Basically a better version of Elemental Bond. Who made this lady cry though, man? That's very unsettling to say the least. That's not alpha behavior. And before I get off enchantments, that's what she said, I wanted to mention Greater Good and why it's greater than some of these and is also pretty good. It's 2 green green for an enchantment, sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then discard 3 cards. Now I run this one in decks that increase creature's power like Xenagos and Zoprandel, the green Dominus dude, however you say this dude. The old Zopi here is looking like the easiest boss in Elden Ring. You know what I'm saying? You can easily draw 12 to 15 cards off of these. Keep the best 7, really sculpt your hand. There are a lot of scenarios where you want an instant speed sacrifice outlet. You know, if the creature has power 4 or greater, you make out like a bandit if there's a board wipe. It's even better if you have any recursion synergies or a theft theme going on. You can sacrifice your opponent's stuff. This card was pricey before a bunch of reprints. Look at the art, dude. You have some Transformers just cannibalizing Optimus Prime. Roll over my guts, dude. And then we got the 9th edition art with the Mary Shelley flavored text, man. That's pretty metal, dude. And honestly, probably my favorite thing to build around is creatures that draw cards on cast or ETB of another creature. You got Beast Whisperer out there, is probably the best of the whole thing. It's very efficient. 2 green green for a creature, Elf Druid. 2 very relevant creature types. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card, dude. I was afraid this guy would get expensive, but it's not bad at all due to it being reprinted pretty frequently. Also has this abomination, dude. Look at this guy just looking at the camera like, listen, I was just gonna whisper to this beast, dude. Can you close the door on the way out, brother? What a creep. Worth noting that this is a cast trigger, unlike our next friend. The Soul of the Harvest. 4 green green for a creature elemental. It's a 6/6 with trample. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. This guy just puts me in mind of fall, dude. He's just lurking in the cornfield. He's being a silly goose. He's spoogetting people out there, being a friend of the brambles. I think this is incredibly underrated. It's not as efficient as Beast Whisperer, but it's a 6/6 trampling body that only cares about non-token ETB, so it's better in decks running Blink or Recursion. And of course, you got the old Regal Force out there. It's 7 mana for a creature elemental. It's a 5/5. You got to pay 3 green pips into this guy. When he enters the battlefield, draw a card for each green creature you control. And of course, this guy's the frog with the horns and the sweet stick. He's just hanging out with some bunnies in the woods, dude. I love this guy in elf decks, man. Using Court of Calling, you just tutor it up with all that elf mana, draw a whole slew of cards. It's a big burst. Then of course you have the classic and not very good Primordial Sage, dude. This was Beast Whisperer back in the day, man. I like this card because the dudes in the art are having a party, and I want to be invited to this party, right? You got ladies, you got Lion's Witch in the wardrobe, you got the Centaurs out there. They all seem to be attending a stand-up comedy show starring the old Primordial Sage. But this card is pretty much garbage now. But not this guy. This guy draws cards on combat damage, and it's Toski, the Bearer of Secrets. 3 and a green for a legendary squirrel, dude. It's a 1/1. This spell can't be countered, has Indestructible. It attacks each combat if able. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. This is about $6 for this very odd squirrel, who apparently can use tools and built himself a prosthetic squirrel paw, dude. I like this a lot because he doesn't say 1 or more, or this ability triggers once each turn. It's basically just a sweet, indestructible squirrel that's drawing you cards. Kind of like the Oran Frostfang. 3 green green for a snow creature. Snake, it's a 2/6. Attacking creatures you control have Death Touch. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. This is a snow snake dude. This guy just got a reprint. Got a bit of a facelift to a more cartoony full art version, but I like this version. This does a lot for 5 mana, it gives you kind of pseudo evasion. It isn't as spongy as Toski though. And if you ever buy a precon deck and this guy's included, just replace him with one of the 2 aforementioned cards. This is a crappy cheap version of those two. You have the Keeper of Fables, dude, he's just a cat, that's it. Also, he says 1 or more, which sucks. So how about some underrated draw options in green, some real under the radar bangers. We got Gilandra up here, 2 and a green for a legendary creature, elf druid, it's a 1/2. Has tap add green, when you spend this mana to cast a spell with mana value 6 or greater, draw a card. This is a mana dork you can put in the command zone, he's got partner if you want. He's an elf and he draws cards, dude. This is pretty conditional, but is a banger in the right decks. Now I do quite a few budget decks, and Hunter's Insight is a solid budget draw card in a combat centered deck, dude. It's 2 and a green for an instant, choose target creature you control. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker this turn, draw that many cards. The ceiling on this is so high for those big alpha strikes, and it's instant speed. In a pinch, this can get you a few cards, great in budget deck. Alright, let's talk about the henge in the room here, dude. I'm fully confident that at some point in the future we're going to find some secret writings of Sheldon Menery, man, R.I.P. the GOAT, and they're going to say, hey, my last wish is to ban the Great Henge, dude. It's impossible to underrate the henge, my friends. It's the best card I've ever seen. If you own one, it brightens up your otherwise loveless and disappointing life, dude. If you failed in life, if you have the Great Henge, you're not doing that bad, alright? The designers even made it the party tree because life's a party in the henge, brother. Whatever, man. It's the best card draw option in green. The tier list just toppled over because there's a huge henge just sitting on top. Now listen, there are 239 green cards that say draw a card, and I'm not going through each one, man, because you know what? I'm sick, dude. I want to go play Liza P. Fantastic game out there, man. I don't know if you guys are into Souls-likes, but this is probably one of the best ones I've ever played. But be forewarned, it is brutally difficult. So depending on whatever archetype you've settled into, I'm not going into all those cards, but just remember when evaluating a card draw option, consider how many cards in your deck they synergize with, right? You're going to run the enchantresses if you're in enchantments. What is your theme? How many cards you can conceivably and realistically reliably draw? Is it a better value than Harmonize? I didn't bring that up here because it used to be the only green draw option, and it's not bad, but these are all better. If it's better than Harmonize, you're going to be in good shape. Anyways, man, this is Nicky G from Better Commander, signing off.